Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. I am your host, Neil Horowitz. You can find me on Twitter at NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. Visit the website, dsmsports.net, for more content and episodes, and of course, follow the podcast, subscribe on your preferred podcast platform. What a great show for you guys today. I've known our guest for several years, and it's been really cool to see him build his practice up. Working with athletes and brands and helping with sponsorship activations and just a lot of good information coming from today's guest, Andrew Stallings. He is founder and president of Othello Group. You're going to hear his insights on that partnership space, on athlete brand development. Again, just someone I respect a ton in this business, and it's really cool to see what he's doing. You're going to learn a lot from him, so stick around for that interview with Andrew. But first, a kind of a word that goes along with Andrew's interview. You'll hear about how they go about activating for partners, especially with some of his smaller-ish athletes, smaller meaning like 1 million followers. So not small by any means, but more in the niche sports, maybe not in your traditional like Big Four, Big Five leagues necessarily in the U.S. But they talk about the idea of going above and beyond for partners. We talk a lot in the sports space and really just the consumer space in general about surprise and delight, about going a little bit extra so that you get that deeper connection and that desire to do more. And you're going to hear some examples from Andrew with working some of his customers, or some of his clients and the brands they work with. But it's about finding those opportunities where you can activate for a partner, even if it's not itemized or stipulated in the exact contract. When you need to, certainly ask permission if you're doing something a little bit avant-garde or off the beaten path a little bit. But if you are trying to experiment on YouTube Shorts and you see a good opportunity to integrate a brand, take it. If you have, whether it's, again, a team, a league, an athlete, whatever kind of partnership activation you have going on, if there's a natural, organic way to insert a partner brand, it just makes sense, or you want, again, try a new content platform or content type, go for it. Do it. The worst case scenario, it fails. Best case scenario, you deliver tons of unexpected value for partners. And, it doesn't have to be some part of a make good or anything like that, but as Andrew will talk about, that solidifies those relationships. That's what turns, a one-off or a two-off or, a smaller deal into a larger deal, because they realize that this is truly a two-way partnership. And us, on the social media side, we have a big role to play there. That's where you have those timely, opportunistic chances to integrate a partner, where you can make, a mountain out of a molehill or whoever analogy you want to use, and you have those levers at your disposal. Be smart about it, of course, but find those opportunities, because, they really do make a difference, and they really do have that sort of exponential effect where they're more than just a linear case of value, because it can turn, again, a short-term partnership into something that lasts forever and or expands to a great deal. So that's his little opening thought for this episode, but I'm going to let the expert take over. You're going to learn a ton and hear some great anecdotes and insights from Andrew Stallings of Othello Group. Right back with today's guest, and I am so excited. I enjoyed catching up with him before we started to record. My guest on the podcast today is Andrew Stallings. He is the founder and president of Othello Group. And welcome to the podcast today, Andrew.
Neil, what's going on, man? It's been, 12, 13, 15 years since we've caught up. It's unbelievable.
It's amazing to see where we were when we started and where you are now. And I'm looking forward to hearing all about Othello Group, everything you built there. Again, just so damn impressive. But before we get into the meat of our discussion, Andrew, tell us about you. Tell us about your career path, all the stops you had along the way, and starting up Othello Group, and any tips for folks that want to work in the space.
Yeah. I mean, I always love the 30,000-foot question to kick things off. I'll try to keep it as succinct as I possibly can. I came from a smaller town in Tidewater, Virginia, Newport News. Most commonly known for Michael Vick's hometown.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
yeah. So I was lucky enough to get to know his family pretty well. Like, he was in high school during the time that I was kind of coming up through middle school, and it's always cool to kind of watch him, come up. And he's family, everyone, great. Again, the whole dogfighting thing, I was kind of past my time being there, so I can't really comment on it. But, I always knew, much like everybody, Neil, that I wanted to work in sports, right? And I think from an early age, we all have those moments that kind of define us, where we're like, man, whether it's watching a Super Bowl moment, sharing a moment with family, seeing your hero hit the ice, there's always that moment that's like, man, I would love to either be an athlete, be a coach, or work for a professional sports team. It's usually not until we probably hit late high school, maybe going into college, or, for those that didn't, do college or university, maybe it's in your early 20s, you kind of begin to start researching, like, how do you exactly do that? For me, I feel like I tell this story a million times, but I base a lot of my success to the East Coast Hockey League and their affiliate, the Roanoke Express. For those that don't know, it's a AA affiliate hockey league in North America, specifically in the US, still active today. And I would mention, I was from Virginia on the east side, moved over to the west side when I was in third grade. My dad switched jobs. I had no friends. I was in a huge learning curve in school and socially. The only thing that I could really do was, go to these hockey games with my dad. It was like our kind of coping mechanism, for the struggles that I was going with in third grade. Right. So I'll never forget, he got season tickets to the Roanoke Express. In AA hockey, it's probably what you imagine. They beat the living hell out of each other. It's just, crash course, brawling most games. But I got to see the world of professional sports through a different lens at 10 years old. The cheerleaders, saw me every game, and they'd let me come down to the tunnel and high five all the players. The coach, I would always bang on the glass behind every game. So I got to know the head coach, and he invited me to practices where I got to skate around at 10 years old with some of the players on the weekend. Some of the players, 19, 20-year-old guys took me under their wing as like, this little cool kid, and, would let me, if they were on injured reserve, I would come do PT and skate around and just clap for them on the bench, when the rest of the team was on a road trip. So I really got to understand the professional aspect of sports early on. And that was like, man, I want to do that. I want to be involved in a team. I want to get to know the operations, management, etc. My dream to this day is to own a minor league hockey team. I don't know when, how, what. Please don't ask me how the planning for that's going, because there's definitely not one at the moment. But that's the dream. That's like the 50-year plan, I think. But, I ended up going to school in Northern Virginia at Marymount University. It was the last school I got accepted into. I had to beg the dean of admissions to let me in after like 12 other schools turned me down. Ended up writing a letter, handwritten note. I was like, hey, please let me in. I'll do this. Got a conditional acceptance, went to Northern Virginia. Most of my family was in Northern Virginia at the time. My favorite sports teams were in Northern Virginia. I was like, no brainer. And for nothing else, I'm going to have a blast socially. Juggled about 5 different jobs throughout college. I was slinging fondue at the Melting Pot. I was coaching women's high school basketball. I was doing freelance journalism for a bunch of hockey blogs and fantasy sports blogs. And then I started interning at SiriusXM Radio in my senior year. And ultimately, that's where our paths crossed, was that I took an internship and turned it into a full-time opportunity on the NASCAR side. Yeah. So I know when you were with the Ducks doing social early in your career, that was same to it when I was a producer on the NASCAR side. And it was kind of around that time in like, again, postgraduate, early 20s, where I'm like, okay, I'm still balancing like 3 jobs on top of this full-time job. And everybody that doesn't know about the world of sports or media, I'm sure if anyone's listened to your podcast, you've had some incredible guests in this space. Everyone will say it, especially early in your career. It's about survival. Like, it's about how quickly can you build your network and how much can you survive off of next to nothing. So I'm juggling all these different jobs, oddball jobs. I'm bartending till 2 a.m, going to the radio studio at 4 a.m. Like it was a mess. But I ended up learning the value of community very, very quickly. And I built a great Rolodex and ultimately hit my ceiling after about 4 years or so there, and got a great opportunity with Octagon to leave everything I had in DC, come up to Connecticut. I didn't even know how to spell Connecticut, nor did I know where it was based out of. I thought it was like up near Maine. So it was eye-opening to me that it was right next to New York City when I came up here. But ended up moving up here, took a great opportunity to work on the events and experiential and hospitality team, jumped around the agency for a lot of years, did a lot with Anheuser-Busch, ultimately switched to another agency called Mosaic doing experiential marketing with Anheuser-Busch in the US, and then went to Constellation Brands, where I continued to work in beer and did field marketing for a few months. But right at that transition point between Mosaic and Constellation, it was kind of like peak Gary Vaynerchuk time, where everyone's like, you need a side hustle, jab, jab, right punch. And I'm just like, man, wouldn't it be great if, instead of making my $51,000 a year and working 18-hour days, that money's never going to change. What if we created a side hustle? Me and my buddies who I played hockey with were like, yeah, let's stick it to the man. Come on. And ultimately I was just like, cool, like let's help like athletes in very niche sports communities. Yeah. And the reason that we went that route was because truthfully, a lot of my friends were in NASCAR. They were in action sports. They were in CrossFit, boxing. I had friends in the NHL, MLB, NBA, but for anybody that has done their homework or knows those spaces, you can go be an NFL agent and you can go represent the third string running back from the New York Jets on the practice squad. But the problem is that there's so much red tape. And to this day, it's getting a little bit better, but there's a lack of creativity. And it takes a massive continent of shifts in order to make change in those sports. For the other sports like volleyball and everything else, like there was an underrated market of representation. There was a lack of creativity. There was a lack of just overall respect for the athletes. And then the brands, like I'd worked with so many brands over the years, like on the agency side and then going in-house a little bit. I'm like, man, brands are always complaining that they don't want to spend $500,000 on a Super Bowl tweet with Tom Brady, but they don't even realize they could spend $50,000 and be sponsoring 3 of the best volleyball players in North America for a multi-year sponsorship agreement and do things at scale with different avenues to activate that just completely can be different. Like like unlike anything before. So it kind of served as a full service agency. Athletes, opportunities were the 2 words that we took. We smashed them together to make a funky little run-on word called Othello that most people can't pronounce out of the gate. So it's already good marketing. But then, after that, I mean, it truthfully was something that snowballed. I think I had like 2 or 3, I call them friends, but they were clients, when I went to Constellation. I was probably in my 3rd or 4th month, probably time at Constellation. And I went on my honeymoon after I got married, came back, landed on the tarmac at JFK, all of my voicemails loaded. And the HR team had accidentally called me on my honeymoon to deliver the news that I was part of a 90-person layoff. And luckily I didn't get that on my honeymoon because that would have ruined my entire trip. But I ultimately got that news, sitting first class. My glowing wife is just so happy we're married. Yay, everything's great. And I'm sitting here like, shit, like I am broke. I have no job. Oh my God. So it was kind of my sink or swim moment. Wow. I had 2 buddies that I started this company with. I quickly realized that I had to make a roadmap in order to get to the last step, which was to buy them out. And I had to do this in a span of 3 months. Gave myself a very, very, very tough, roadmap to be able to accomplish all this. And ultimately, like at the 2.5 month mark, I was able to sit down with them and luckily be able to buy them out with like no resistance or hesitation. And then from there, just everything snowpiled. We have to date about 25 athletes on retainer that we're working with and growing, about 110 different brands and properties on retainer and agencies that we work with on a variety of different projects. And it's still bootstrapped, like it's mostly me managing the athletes day to day. We have different contractors and freelancers that help us out on different parts of the business. I was mentioning to you before this, I have a senior director of operations that helps out with a lot, but I just realized like I don't need a 100-person staffed agency in order to define success, because luckily when COVID came and this was a thing and this was my full-time job, we were playing in sports that didn't necessarily, I don't want to call them COVID proof, but they were quicker to activate and get back to sport than the NFL or NBA were. And then on top of that, the brands were eager to look at what we were doing. We were scalable because our overhead was so minimal. Our athletes were also desperate for any money at the time. So, we didn't hurt ourselves in the long term by belittling value. We just showed creative scale and showed opportunities to kind of do things a little bit differently. Obviously, now that the world is somewhat back to normal, yeah, sure. Some people are going back to the big New York City and LA ad agencies. Some people are going and blowing, big marketing budgets against TV commercials. That's fine. But, we get more inbound and calls now because we were that asset and option to a lot of marketers, to a lot of athletes, just to be, I don't ever like to say a one-stop shop, but at least a unique asset and tool for consideration, creativity, and differentiation. So, like I said, it's fun. It's different. It's definitely not bulletproof. We fail a lot. We lose every day more than we win. But the good news is that, the wins seem to overcome, the small losses here and there. So it's incredibly humbling to be able to sit down and reflect on it with stuff like this with you. And, we're just trying to be better than we were yesterday, as cliche as it sounds. That's literally my goal, is if I can sleep better than I did yesterday, that's a huge win.
So dang cool to hear it all. I definitely wanted to dive into the nitty gritty of things, but before I do that, I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to that day when you bought out, the co-founders of Othello Group at the time, and you're like, okay, this is me now. I got to make this happen. What was that day like? And what are your first steps? What are those next 90 days look like? Where okay, I got to take this thing that was looking like it had some promise, and now it's got to work. It has to.
Yeah. No, it's a great question. I haven't explained too much about it before on a podcast, but I'll give you the very personal side of it. I knew I had to write checks that day to those guys. I knew that I was meeting them at a bar before we were playing hockey together in a 10 o'clock adults men's league game that night. As you can probably imagine, the guy that's writing two massive checks, at least massive in my mind at the time, to two guys that are getting out like kind of the sticky bandits, they're like, we did next to nothing. We'll take a check. See you later. How do you think they played in the game that night? They were happy as all get. They were great. I will never forget writing those checks and just being so upset, so pissed off. Like, I was just angry at everybody. Like, to me, like there was a lot of self-induced pain and pressure that I put myself through to make this work. I was not confident it was going to work. And I think that was the hardest part, is that I, to this day, still believe that a lot of the success of this company was in large part due to my community, my connections, and I mean, they helped build it from a, operations and branding and stuff like that standpoint. But the meat and potatoes, like the overall, intestines, if you will, of this company, really came in a large part from me. And so when you have to write those checks, it sucks. So you're saying like, haha, high five, we're all still friends. But I sat there and I probably pounded 6 beers before that game. And I just played the game. I remember having a horrible game, spent most of it in the penalty box, threw up, on the bench. Like it just sucked. Like it literally is just like mentally, you're just going through it. You're going through these motions. You wake up the next morning and you're just like, it was the first real splash of accountability. It was like, okay, like you don't have to wake up at 9 o'clock, Andrew. Like you don't have to be in the office by 9 o'clock. Like it was the first real smack of accountability, as being somebody that was like, I had a severance package sitting in my bank account. Like I was fine, for the time being. I could have sat there and just applied for jobs on Indeed or LinkedIn. And there were times that I did, but a lot of it was just, kind of a really awe-inspiring, like next few weeks of like an exercise of true accountability. There is no one coming to save you. There is nobody coming to help you. It is 100% on you. And when you get through that fear of loneliness, it's actually really amazing. It's so, I don't know how to explain it. For anybody that started a business or anybody that's gone through just a radical transformation in their life, whether it's getting back to the gym or a diet or a breakup, you hit this moment where you realize, like, I don't want to say it's rock bottom, but it's like, there's no other way but up, right? So you go through this and you just, every single thing you do is not a negative. If you fall, it's a learning lesson. So every single day moving forward, I just looked at everything as like, this is learning. This is growth. Like, I'm going to really F up a lot of this stuff. And I did, and I still do. Like, I get people that, will hit me up and say, this is messed up on your website or that. And, of course I crack down on people who are overseeing that stuff, but, no one's perfect. And I think that's why so quickly in my career and to this day, I hate people that are always like, oh, what are you an expert in? Why are you focusing on just this? I hate that term. I hate experts. I think that we all should be challenging ourselves to maybe own and focus on one category and area, but we should always be evolving, like different facets and areas of learnings and teachings and opinions on what we learn and do, because you're not going to be able to accomplish anything, whether it's professionally or personally, if you're too stubborn or closed-minded to not, really see that or address that. So, that's really like that day, it always sticks in my head because I still see those guys. I still play hockey with them and they're still at their 9-to-5 jobs and, they're happily married. They have kids. Like, I don't hate them. They're good dudes. They're great guys, but you grow apart. You certainly grow apart in a lot of ways. And, it kind of will always forever sting. And I don't know, maybe one day if it'll stop, maybe if it's something where people just don't see each other and grows apart, but those before anything else, those are your friends first, right? Like, and I think anytime you go into business, people always say, like, don't work with family or friends. There's a high risk. And, luckily the reward is paid off to date. But, I probably lost like 2 really, really great friendships to that. But who knows, whether it was this or something else, if those friendships were even going to be what they were at this point, years and years later. So, I always just try to remember and remind myself that it was never going to be bulletproof. It was never going to be perfect. Just the universe has a way of feeding us stuff and you have to just take it, run with it, and make it your own.
Totally. And I totally appreciate the idea of, being comfortable with being uncomfortable, almost embracing being uncomfortable, like using that as fuel and not as something that's going to keep you down or like make you uncertain every day. But I want to talk about the athletes that you work with, the quote unquote niches, to use your word, that you found. Like, what were these athletes doing before Othello came along? Were they just, taking some basic deals that, the endemic brands were giving them to use their equipment and call it a day? I think now we almost have normalized looking at college NIL, looking at all the, the creator economy out there, allowing individuals to do their own thing on TikTok, on Instagram. And we take for granted that these brands just are looking to work with individuals now. But when you were starting out and as you have grown Othello over the years, what were the solutions like for those athletes early on? And what did you go to them and say, hey, you can aspire to do more. Here's what we can do.
Yeah, it's tough because I could probably talk for a whole podcast episode on this. It's probably one of the more frustrating things that we deal with. And it's a twofold topic, Neil. And the first thing is, how should an athlete, a creator, an influencer, or just an aspiring individual that wants to monetize their social media or personal brand, how do they manage it? What's the right way to manage it? What are the industry norms? What is the education behind it? And there is a massive, massive void in terms of what the value is and what the perceived value is across a lot of different verticals. You can ask what certain people at different followings, sports, variations, ages, races, sex, whatever do, but nothing and no 2 people are even remotely the same. I have seen athletes with almost identical social media followings, identical audiences, and identical engagement rates and assets, everything. And I've seen one brand offer them $15,000 for an activation and campaign. I've then seen them also offer like $1,000 to the other individual. And the perception is always how educated, how confident, and how willing are you to risk and walk away from any offer that's presented to you. And I think that's the hardest thing, right? Is that every single athlete that we work with, they are in the business of making money. And as much as I beat into a pulp that our relationships with our athletes are not money driven first, they are very much driven at the end of the day. They are a big driving factor to what we do because this is their livelihood in a lot of ways. So what we have to always remind them is that money up front is always going to be the hardest thing for you to that we ask them to dismiss. We look at every relationship with all of our clients and athletes as an investment to their personal brand, an investment to their education. And I've told every athlete that I've ever encountered, I said, my goal, albeit it hasn't happened to date, my goal is hopefully you learn enough, you gain enough, and you become knowledgeable enough by having seats at the table with us in meetings with these brands and these companies and different properties, that in a year, 2 years, maybe you don't need us. Maybe you can do this on your own. Maybe you're just like, all I need is a lawyer to just double check my contracts, and that's it. The hard part is that even though you learn a lot, things are always changing, right? So it's like, even if you gain enough knowledge, in one area, there's always something new that comes along. So it's very, very different. But in terms of our athletes, many of them have either done it solo and have just grown tired of the game, the negotiations, the back and forth. They really don't want to engage every single minute on the hour with the brands, not because they just don't like to enjoy it, but the brands can ask for a lot. The agencies ask for a lot. I mean, a good example, I'm dealing with an agency right now. The turnaround times to get approvals and clients and contracts, like, it's hours. Like, they literally emailed us. They're like, is this athlete interested in this? Great. Let us know by 4 p.m. Eastern today. I look at the clock, it's 2:15. I'm like, in what world? I'm like, they're at training camp right now. Like, I don't know. I haven't even got a chance to review this brief. And it's really, really tough, because the expectation is like, go, 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 demand. Like, I'm paying you for a service. I want it. Athletes get tired of that. They need a buffer. They need somebody to defend them. And it can't be their parents or their uncle or cousin all the time. They really need somebody that's knowledgeable and that's willing to not just be a one-person army, but know when to pull a lot of different levers and bring them to different conversations in order to defend them. I always call us, like, it's somewhat magicians in a lot of ways, right? It's like you're going toe-to-toe in a Pokemon battle. Like, which Pokemon matchup, based on who you're going against, are you going to pull? Like, are you going to pull the Squirtle? Are you going to pull a Charizard? Like, who knows? Because no two conversations with people are the same. You're reading people, you're reading the trust, you're reading the humility of it. There's a lot of ethics that go into what we do. So, many of them they use us because they need that trust. They need somebody that's going to go there, find their best interest. Others look at us as like a creative resource. They're like, hey, I already have all these deals. I know I got great deals. I just need somebody to be constantly upselling, showing how I can bring more value, how this is growing, that's growing. If TikTok's not working, my email newsletter is. If my email newsletter isn't working, guess what? We're starting a subscription box service in the next 3 months. Like they just want us to be constantly in that person's ear to help build them. The last thing is that the athletes just, I've said they've gotten tired. They really just want to learn. They also want to have that protection. But at the end of the day, they really just want to sit there and not have to focus on this as much as they probably should. And that's probably the hardest part about what we do, is that even when we come in, some days it's Othello Group, handle everything. Just let me know, hit me up, once a week phone call, text me, okay, bye. And then out of nowhere, they will come back and be like, I want updates on the hour every day, this and that. So you're really managing a lot of versatile and volatile personalities on both ends of the spectrum, both of the athletes and the brands. You're the constant middleman. And, our team is always trying to just make sure that we help both sides understand that we're not here to be the sneaky, skeevy lawyers that are just, this is the number, this is the contract, here you go. We really are trying to lead with empathy. We're trying to lead with, I always call it the 4 E's. Like, it's evolution, it's enhancement, it's entertainment, and it's empathy. Like, we're always trying to kind of build and go off of those areas. But yeah, I mean, typically some athletes have either had no managers or agents, or they have, and they've been put on a roster, like been on the shelf for 45 other athletes, and they literally get their team deal done and that's it. And they just want more of a hands-on experience. So that's why what we do is a little bit different. The reason we don't have that many athletes too is, on top of that, we also have, retainers, built in all of our contracts. Like we're offering PR services, digital strategy. Like we're not just managers. Like we really offer abundant amount of services. And instead of doing just stuff where it's based off commissions on influencer deals and your team deal, we're really offering a brevity of services that, to date, a lot of our athletes they capitalize on and they go from there.
And I think too, like in the way you sort of talked about it, is you are investing in the athlete just as much as they're investing their time with you. And you look at I'm thinking about this dichotomy of there's the professional development side where I want to be the best in my chosen sport. And if I'm the best, then, the rest will take care of itself. And then there's the other side of, well, yeah, but if you want to upsell, if you want to maximize that, then there's the professional development side, which is your sport, and maybe the brand development side, the athlete as a brand, and you can win in both ways, and both ways are going to, ultimately make you more valuable. And even if you're not, the number one CrossFit athlete in the world, you can still, make more money than the number one CrossFit athlete in the world if you have a stronger brand. So like, how do you ultimately work with athletes when it comes to that of saying, yes, I want you to be spending all that time in the gym, on the practice field or whatever. But if you work with us as well, like we can do X, Y, and Z and make sure that that next deal you get is going to be 10% more, 20% more. You'll get that many more offers. What's that split like? And how do athletes tend to gravitate toward, that professional development side, that brand development side?
I think the one thing a lot of our athletes typically, cater to when I'm pitching them or explaining them how we're different is the trust factor, right? Like they want to know, like, how can I turn over my brand, my business? Why should I trust you? And I tell them that out of the gate, they shouldn't. And they really should join us for meetings with new brands, new properties, like, new projects. If for nothing else, they should build that trust and rapport with us, but they should also gauge and see how we work. But on top of that, to your point, that's where they maximize the value with the brand partners by showing up, right? Like if you have an athlete that shows up to the meeting and pops on the Zoom call for the first meeting, man, like if I'm a brand manager, like, yeah, it's great to talk to an agent or a manager, whatever. But if the athlete shows up too, I kind of think that's cool. Like, I'm like, man, like I respect the hell out of that. Like that gives me the opportunity to be able to build my own relationship with the athlete if I'm the brand. And that's what the brand wants. The athlete knows that subliminally they may or may not want it, but they need it. They need to make sure that they have that rapport, because without it, they are fully submissive to whatever their agent or manager says. And then what happens if your manager or agent drops you and you're not seeing email chains, if you're not on Zoom calls, or in vice versa? What if you fire your agent or your manager and you just don't know what happened behind? Like there's a lot of what ifs. So you get to that point where you build that trust and that cadence. But I tell all of our athletes, it's like one of my CrossFit athletes was with me for the last 5 days in San Francisco and in Sonoma. Like we sat down with her sponsors. She was with me at all day meetings, content shoots, like talking about 2023 planning. She was there. And you know what? She probably solidified her relationship with both of those brands for the next 5 years because of it. Like it was having her there, listening, engaged, not on her phone, but fully dialed in and understanding and asking questions that probably set herself like apart from any other athlete that they're going to work with in the next 5 years. That's the good stuff. Like that's the secret sauce, is that if you have a manager that wants to include you in those conversations where necessary, I will say not every meeting they should be in, like, but right place, right time, right players in the room, they should be there. They should learn. They should be able to understand the brand, the company, the morals, the people that they're working with and representing. Because if they are, social content, messaging, and really explaining to their own audience why they work with a brand is going to come second to none. It's not going to be just hashtag ad. It's going to be, let me tell you a story about a time that I went to San Francisco and sat down with the CEO of this company and what happened. Like people love that shit. And we don't see enough of it. Like it's too turn and burn. It's too quick. It's too transactional. And again, I'm not saying that there's an immediate solve to it, but when you can find those opportunities that work on both ends of the table for the long game, that's the good stuff.
How much more important is it if you are in whatever a more niche sport to get those non-endemic brands, especially to be viable as a social media person or wherever you want to, or wherever brand medium you want to talk about. I even look at for example some of the top gamers and esports players, like some of them, whatever, PewDiePie, even Ninja, they're not winning esports tournaments. They're not even maybe the best of their game, but they are commanding the biggest deals because they have that online brand that is second to none. So like, how do you look at that? Like, yes, your profession is professional athlete, but if you really want to maximize everything you're doing out there, you got to focus on the whole person. Like, how important is that? And in some cases, it's just not really a factor.
A good example for you, I have a female surfer who's currently ranked number 2 in the world right now. She's got probably 6 events left in the year. She's going for a championship. She's 22 years old. Probably does not want to even fathom dealing with brand development and, anything but money. Like money and competition probably is where her only mindset is in a lot of ways. The great thing about this individual is that she has fully bought in to us helping her understand that right place, right time, we need to be capitalizing on new media avenues. We just got done doing a piece of Muscle and Fitness this last week. Where in the world would a number 2 Costa Rican surfer find herself in Muscle and Fitness magazine other than that opportunity? Like, no one in Muscle Fitness is probably watching surfing too often, but they just learned about this athlete this week. Same to it, she really cares about her country. So what do? We're able to go through UNICEF, and she's becoming the first female global ambassador from Costa Rica. Stuff like that, it moves the needle. It takes time, but what she's doing is setting herself up for the long game. 22 years old, anything can happen. Anything can happen at any moment. Your leg could be bit off, ACL gone, concussions. Then what? She's setting herself up for the future. And that is what a lot of athletes are beginning to do, is not worrying about it at so much the down and decline of their professional career or even after. They should and they will be looking more and more at the pinnacle, at the climb, at the very, very peak of their success. And you're seeing that a lot with people right before they get there. Again, this athlete hasn't won a championship yet, but she's well on her way, and she's going to be a competitor to do that. And whether she wins a championship or not, she's using this clout and this rise right now to pretty much ride this wave in 15 different directions rather than just one way. And that's ultimately what is going to set her up for success. And it's super important because timing of when you start investing into your own brand, not just financially, but from an educational side, is pivotal. It's absolutely pivotal, and it's critical to what we're trying to help them understand every day when we explain to them. So they're not all like that. I wish they were, but they're not all like that day in and day out.
No, this is I saw what you did there too with Ride the Wave. So kudos on the great pun. A few minutes up here, the Andrew Stallings, founder and president of Othello Group. And Andrew, there are so many different avenues we can go. So many more things I want to talk to you about. But we'll try to do our best here in the next few minutes. And I want to look at from the brand perspective side and what they're looking for. And are you looking at, especially nowadays, we look at more like performance marketing things. We look at who they're reaching, or I even think about you being that little kid at the ECHL games. And yes, this ECHL player might never touch an AHL ice or let alone NHL, but to the wherever the 200 kids in attendance, that's the hero, and they're willing to follow him. I think about the kids that go to like an AVP event for volleyball and how they love them, even if they're not like nationally or internationally known athletes. And so, like, when you're talking to brands, what are those strongest selling points? Is it, the fact that she is Costa Rican, for example, to use that surfer, or that, hey, she is the most important person in this sport, and there are a ton of fans in this sport that will follow what she is. So what are brands looking for, and how maybe has that evolved over years with Othello?
The best architects in the world are the ones that have multiple tools in their belt. And the same to it goes with management and representation to date. If you're leaning specifically on social media following as your main asset, or even what you're doing on the playing field, you're dead in the water. Brands more than ever want to know, and they want to work with, and they want to converse not be spoken to. They want to converse with agencies and teams and athletes and influencers, whoever, that have a diverse portfolio of assets for them to activate against. They don't all need to be built out. You don't need to have 1 million followers across every single platform you work with. You don't need to have audiences with massive buying power. What you do need to show is that you're working towards, and you're trying, and you're steadily building and finding the success to be able to provide case studies to these brands of what is working, what can work, and what can be better with their help. And I think that's the most important thing, is that when we talk to a lot of brands, sure, they, that surfer or that CrossFit athlete or that NASCAR driver is, they're great, but they're not looking at their name. They're not looking at just their social media. They're looking at, how can this individual or how can this agency bring forth more assets to complement existing campaigns, further, brand, activation ideas and stuff that we have. How can they complement and be a supplemental resource to us? Because a lot of brands, they get overwhelmed with new partnerships. Building a brand new partnership or even just a campaign overnight, a lot of people forget, like, it's a heavy lift for the people on the brand side. They got to get it approved. They got to get budgets. They got to get wording, messaging, legal, procurement, shipping, distribution. That's just off the top of my tongue, and I think so too often people think that it's just easy to email Puma and say, hey, I want to be the next global ambassador. And, because I'm the number 2 surfer in the world. You can't do that, right? Like, you can't just convince Puma to shift their strategy overnight. What you can do is to converse and to build and find new strategies. Look, we're doing very, very well, but we haven't even touched the iceberg, because what we're doing from an agricultural perspective is that we're still looking at everything from a coffee bean perspective. It takes 5 years, for a coffee farmer to really make good money and value, because they have to plant, they have to harvest, they have to crop. We're still in year 4, and our plants are just starting to sprout. We are planting seeds day in and day out for our athletes, for our brands, for our agency partners, and we're still trying to figure it all out. And I'm telling you, when that next year or 2 comes, I'm excited, because that's when all of this networking, all of this like true energy towards education and community and value and building, I hope is going to be able to pay off more than it already has. It's the long game. It's the long game for everybody at the table. And you have to understand that the people that eat their dinner the fastest are the ones that you never want to invite to dinner. It's always the people that take their time, chew their food, ask questions, and they're there for the conversation and the experience.
Is there a little bit of a tangential lesson in there for brands too, to think about? There's a difference between building a campaign around an individual athlete and everything rides on that athlete, everything is tied to the athlete, versus how can I integrate athletes into my existing campaign? So you're not trying to reinvent the wheel for every single partnership that you're doing. And is that kind of how you guys sort of see it, especially with some of the athletes who are like, hey, we see what your brand is doing. This is how our athlete can make it better.
That's one way. That's absolutely one way. And I think it's important to note that all too often I see this every single day. And I tell, a lot of interns that come in through our agency that help out with the business development side of things and the partnership side of things. I spend a lot of time educating them, because they're so eager. They're like, we're in sales, we're cold emailing, cold calling. Like, we gotta go.
Dial.
Yeah. But I'm like, no. Like, we're planting seeds. We're going the distance. And they get frustrated with that, because obviously they're here for 6 months, a year, and they're just like, I'm not going to see this through. But they have to understand that the patience of these opportunities requires a lot of research, a lot of studying, a lot of these brands, budgets coming, going, opening, closing. Like, there's a lot of volatility that, you have to think like a brand. And a lot of people struggle with that because they've never worked on a brand. They've never really built their own personal brand.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big struggling point for a lot of people on the agency side and also the management side, is that they've never worked on either the property or the brand side. They've never sat on that side of the table. I think a big part of my success is that I've been able to work with some incredible brands at scale over the last few years. I've been able to learn from a lot of great properties, a lot of great leaders, both junior and senior. And I've been able to apply that and ultimately cultivate that. You need to be patient. You need to be doing your research. You need to be looking at, like, typing in that brand name into Google News every day and looking at the first 3 pages to see, what's going on. Because, if their stock just took a 50 cent on the dollar plummet yesterday, you probably don't want to reach out to them this week and talk about stuff and be like, hey, I saw that just happened. And I think it's really great timing for us to talk about 6-figure sponsorship. Like, he's going to tell you 2 words: get beeped, So I always tell people it's the long game that plays the best dividends for this. You have to be very, very educated. It can be super frustrating because things change by the minute and you're not always going to be able to see it from the outside. But that's also why having a good community and people on the inside to kind of educate you and talk to you about it can really, really help you out down the road.
No, I can totally appreciate that aspect of doing your homework, feeling like that you actually know what the brand is trying to do. And to your point, like planting those seeds and networking over time, making sure that when the time is right, that you're there. One last thing for you, Andrew, before I get to the terrible stat. And again, the time is flying by. This is awesome. I want to hear about what your thoughts on where we're going with the idea of monetizing athletes. I mean, yes, like early on it was, okay, athletes make money from contracts and from sponsorships. And now this idea of you're monetizing individuals, and there's so many different ways to do it. And you're seeing athletes start their own merchandise lines. You're seeing them, sell NFTs, and this whole idea of this creator marketplace and how it applies to athletes. So with the athletes you're working with, and you think about going forward, is there this more diverse set of, hey, yes, partnerships and brand opportunities are one thing, but this athlete might want to start a recovery brand, their own line or a merch or whatever it might be. Where do you see that space going in the near term and the long term?
I think it's very overwhelming in a lot of ways. I think that there's great potential right now because a lot of people look at this world in this current economic state as you and I sit here on June 15th, 2022 at 4:01 p.m. Eastern, and we say, like, man, we can so quickly pull off the negatives, right? Like, we can sit here and say, like, this is going wrong. This is going wrong. Oh my God. But what's exciting for, I don't know, maybe psychotic people like me is that I look at everything right now as a renaissance era. Like, this is the best time to be trying new things, to be testing the roads that aren't really paved just yet. You can fail, and it is okay. It's totally okay to be trying stuff right now. And I think more than ever, this is like the best time to be trying new things that aren't traditional, not just, Instagram or TikTok or Pinterest or social media in general. People want experiences. And I think that's something that we've been having a lot of conversations with brands about is, why don't we go to Montana and do a summit, with like an athlete and build a 3-day immersive experience around this, have your brand own this and get content around it and do like this limited edition, like super VIP merchandise drop that can maybe serve as an NFT if that's your thing and can unlock access to seeing this athlete at all of their events in 2023. Again, that's something that's just off the top of my head that we've discussed in some degree with some brands. And I think the more that you can provide layers to any of your thoughts is super pressing and important. There's always the purpose of influencer marketing in those agencies that, like, hey, I got 15 grand here, 50K here, $500 there. Like, it's quick cash. I think, again, it's becoming more and more unauthentic every single day. But it's really, really important for you as a representative of any athlete or any person that you work with to do your absolute best, whether it is a short-term or long-term partnership, to find the authenticity, find the pivot, and be prepared when things don't perform the way that the brand is expecting them to. Be prepared to offer up alternatives, be able to, give more and more and more before you're just sending over that invoice. Because that's the stuff, right? Like, you might be educating them by saying, like, hey, if this is just an Instagram campaign, I get that you want a carousel. I've been seeing great value with reels. Do you mind if for you on the house, I just experiment by mixing your product in on this reels and let's see how it goes? A lot of people won't do that. But if you're like one of those more lesser known creators with value and upside, like take the risk. What's it going to do? It's going to be an extra hour of work for you. And you know what? You might have gotten yourself 3 more campaigns because of it. So you have to always be willing to over deliver a little bit. But I do think it's very, very important to understand your value. I was talking to an agency today for one of my athletes for a 3-month campaign, and we are going back and forth, and we're just at a difference of like $3,000 or $4,000 on this campaign. And she told me candidly, she's like, I'll be honest, I have another individual that I just got for double the social media following, half of the price of what I'm willing to give you, and double the assets. And stuff like that, it goes either one or two ways. I either cringe because I'm like, man, I really hope that there's not somebody out there that's really just giving the farm up, you know, for less amount of money, because they don't understand their value. And it's also kind of poo-poo on the agency for taking advantage of them. But at the same time, you know, that does happen. But on the same time, you're in my business, you're a degenerate gambler. So you're looking across the table and you're playing poker. You're like, are you just blowing smoke? Like, are you just trying to say that so I settle? Like, so it's constantly a game of poker, you know, when you're in negotiations. And, you know, I do my best to offer pro bono consulting to athletes, you know, that DM me, DM our account, send emails. Like we probably get like 20, 30 emails a week, you know, from different athletes and people that are anonymous. And I do my best to answer all of them, to just be an asset and a resource, but it's tough. You know, obviously you're still trying to provide an immense value for those retained athletes and clients, but I guess you can call it the Gary Vaynerchuk model. You never want to turn people away. You always want to be approachable. You want people to think that, you know, hey, you at least know somewhat about what you're doing.
I love this. There's so many good takeaways of just, you know, being passionate about what you do, which you clearly are, and caring about more. It's not just a transaction. These are partnerships. These are relationships that go a long way. And ultimately knowing and not being afraid to know and acknowledge your value, whether that's as a business owner, as you are, or as an up-and-coming athlete or a star athlete. And I mean, we're seeing that play out right now with NIL in the college space. And no one knows what X or Y, Z is supposed to be worth. And we're all, you know, learning as we go here. But it's so important to take those stances and you know, and make sure that you know what you're worth, and also that you're delivering that value as well.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part of what we're facing right now is notoriously I've taken a stance against NIL, not the process. I'm all for athletes getting paid and being monetized and making money to certain degrees. But I think right now, it's the number one example of just what the wild, wild west is that there is no structure, right? Like there is no regulation really from the different layers that this all involves. And it's very spread out, and it's very, very scary in a lot of ways. I've seen athletes like get hit with legal papers from brands and agencies, and they're just like, what the heck? I didn't know any better. I just signed this contract and I did it. And, you know, it's scary, man. Like I give a lot of credit to, you know, companies like Open Doors and stuff that, you know, are trying their best to be resources and allies. I know there's a lot of lawyers like Darren Heitner is doing a lot of good work in the NIL space as a lawyer as well. I personally am, just from a business perspective, I'm too bullish that I don't think it's like double Dutch for me. It's like I'm trying to figure out right place, right time. When that time comes, I'll be ready. But for right now, we are just watching from afar. And I tell athletes that hit us up, we get a lot of college athletes that hit us up. They're like, you know, I want to do this. I want to work with this company. I want to do that. And it's like, God bless you. I get it. I understand. I wish I could do more to help you. But the number one advice I always give them is to just do whatever you can to make sure that you have a lawyer or a family member that's in legal, or someone look over every single one of your contracts. Like, please do not just sign something for the sake of signing something.
Let me ask you one more quick thing. I promise we'll get to this episode's shareable stat and then our pit stop segment. And that is the idea of that sort of pay transparency. We think about, like there's, for folks that don't know, there's like Sponsor Pitch, Sponsor United, where, they are posting deals that get out there to try to give some idea of what things are going for, what the going rate is. When you are negotiating deals, like, is there any sort of aspect of that in, your space, or are you judging off of what you've heard from other agencies, from past deals that you guys have made? Like, how do you know what numbers are fair?
A lot of it just comes with experience, Neil. Like a lot of it is just coming from continuous conversations. I know that sounds probably completely opposite to what I've said this entire podcast of, like there needs to be structure, there needs to be this, there needs to be all knowing, but it's one of those things where you can't really explain it. It just, there's certain benchmarks, there's certain, old wives' tales in terms of like, you can base algorithm off of engagement rate to social to reach to, there's a lot of things. I think the number one thing that we always do is just asking the brand, what are their goals? What are their marketing goals? Like if it's all social based, it's all social audience based. I mean, there's a bit of manipulation that you can even do to that. And I think, knowing your background, obviously you've worked in social for many years. Like you obviously know that there's paid marketing, there's whitelisting, there's targeting. So if I do a deal with an athlete and we have to hit 1 million impressions on 2 Instagram posts, and it's a $10,000 deal for this athlete, chances are, from a safety net perspective, I might take $1,000 off that, go to my digital contract agency and say, hey, I need to make sure that we are like whitelisting and targeting this to hit this benchmark and goal against the audience that they want. And again, it's a win-win, but a lot of agents won't do that, right? They're like, no, we'll roll the dice. But like, if you have a lot of those hidden, benchmarks and goals in your contracts these days, you need to be strategic in how you go about doing that. Maybe some of them, they just really want brand awareness. We have great connections with out-of-home agencies and, really unique areas where we can activate, in super unique markets with high foot traffic. So a lot of it's just asking those questions. Like you have to understand how they're measuring the return. Some people, it's just big numbers. That's all they want. Other people, they're like, man, we want signups. We want link clicks. We want sales. I think the worst nightmare you can ever have when working with a brand or an agency or anybody is if they are 100% sales driven and nothing else, probably best for you to walk away because they are not seeing the bigger picture of the authenticity of a relationship. And they probably haven't done the homework on your audience. You probably don't even know the best way to communicate something because we deal with a lot of brands where it's just quick. It's quick. Like, hey, here's the money. Here's the contract. And this is what we want to do. Here's a creative brief. This is exactly what we want the caption to be. Go. And it's like, hey man, this isn't an Airbnb. You can't just rent my social media page and just do whatever you want with it. Like you have to literally let us have some creative say and back and forth and dialogue. So, in short, a lot of it just comes from speaking with and having constant conversations with people in the social space. I think, it's a testament to how you and I ended up here over a decade later, but Twitter has been the best avenue in my professional career. Marketing Twitter, social Twitter, sports Twitter. I've made so many great connections. The DMs are your best friend. You have to stand out. You have to be creative. But I always say, like, don't be afraid to ask people for advice. Like, there's so many people I know at influencer agencies that are willing to give me the intel. They won't share exact, athletes or influencers or agencies or whatever, but they'll give me case studies. They'll say, these are deals that we got. This is what it looks like. And, you can't really get that unless you have a good network to kind of use to your advantage.
Yeah, I just want to bottle up all those insights from the last 90 seconds here and share them all. And just such good stuff, man. We're going to have some more fun with you in our pit stop segment. So stick around for that. But first episode, Shareable Stat coming up right now. So awesome talking to Andrew Stallings of Othello Group, founder and president of Othello Group. It's like catching up with a friend, except a friend who is full of great experience and wisdom and knowledge in the space. And we're going to have some more fun with him with our quick hitting questions coming up in just a moment. But first, this episode's Shareable Stat. And simple shareable stat, it relates to this episode, which is a lot about brand activation, partnerships, and athletes and brand development as well. But we're going to look at the partnership side, and the shareable stat for you guys today is 2022, as in $2022. That was the amount bet for charity between Rakuten and Vistaprint. Now, what's unique about those brands? Well, they are the jersey sponsors for the NBA Finals participants, of course, won by the Warriors. Spoiler alert, if you haven't watched, of course. Rakuten is the jersey sponsor for the Golden State Warriors and Vistaprint for the Boston Celtics. And as the series was getting started, Rakuten, using Twitter, of course, where else, hit up Vistaprint and said they wanted to make a little friendly bet of $2022. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, it kind of took off a little bit. And for a brand post and a brand interaction, it got pretty good engagement with fans. And what it does even more, one, it allows fans, of course, to give that little bit of emotional investment and really make them feel that this is a part of the team. Rakuten or Vistaprint is part. When I think Warriors, I think Rakuten. They are part of it. They're on our side of the fence, trying to beat the opponent, trying to root on the Warriors, just like the fans are. And you just get that little bit more of connection, and also just that association. A big part of these deals are just that brand association. That when you think Warriors, you think Rakuten, and vice versa. When you see the Rakuten brand, you know that they are a friendly face that you want to support because they support the team that you love. Yes, I'm not going to go into all the other variables that come into play about that, but it truly does solidify that association. When you have some of these iconic brand and property relationships that have lasted for generations, for decades. People think of the team when they think of that brand. Try to think of those in your head right now. Which brands and teams or brands and leagues come to mind? There are definitely more than a few, and that goes on the athlete side as well. So, long story short, look for ways to sort of get different, be original. And I love the idea here of what the two partners did, maybe with the consultation of the properties of the teams behind them. But think about when you have a big spotlight, how can you get a little bit of value or a little bit more value and have that little exponential effect by potentially working with the partners of the other team and having those collaborations. Collab is a big buzzword right now between collabs on Instagram, collabs on Twitter, collabs in general, brand collabs, influencer creator collabs. So how can you get smart and collab with athletes on your team, collab with opponents who are playing against you in the same game or the same series? It really is a rising tide that lifts all boats, and it makes fans that much more, that much more vehement, that much louder, that much more deeply invested. So get creative. It's really, really cool to be able to have this conversation, and that goes back to our shareable stat, which again is $2,022. That was the bet between Rakuten and Vistaprint, which of course Rakuten ended up winning when the Warriors won the NBA championship. All right, that's a shareable stat. Think about it, talk about it, ponder it, but more importantly, stick around for some great quick-hitting questions and more knowledge and stories from Andrew Stallings of Othello Group. Back in this episode's shareable stat, and I am joined once again by Andrew Stallings. He is the founder and president of Othello Group. Andrew learned so much, did such a great job in your interview. Are you now ready to do a few pit stops?
Let's get it rocking and rolling, baby.
All right, number one, we're going to go back to your days with Sirius XM NASCAR when you and I first connected all those years ago. And tell me your favorite idea or execution or segment from your time with Sirius XM NASCAR. It could be any of the above.
I think when you're a producer in radio or media in any degree, you're often measured on your guest. And I mean, again, you get a big fish, you get a big guest on your show. That's huge. I will always remember that my program director gave me a call and was blown away because I had been chasing Roger Penske, who the owner of Penske Racing and owns IndyCar now. Like he's like the owner of IndyCar. But he was not, I guess at the time for many years, was not doing a lot of public facing interviews, or at least was not doing a lot of phone interviews. And we were able to not get him once, but twice in the matter of a year to do, some hits on our radio show for the morning drive. So that's always something that I pride myself on. But looking back on it, I wish that I was able to push myself a little bit more creatively back then because, it's such a blank canvas. And it was one of the first areas that I was able to go through kind of creativity, from a marketing and media standpoint. But, I think there were a lot of fun projects that we did, from just like voiceovers and mashing up stuff and songs. Like you almost felt like a DJ most days, which was really, really cool. Yeah.
Shoot, to think about how far audio has come as a medium since those days. I mean, the stuff that you hear that Wondery does or that Cadence 13 does with their podcast, it's really cool to think about how far we've come from an audio perspective. But still, it's gotta be awesome to think back to those days when you were able to book Roger Penske and be able to have those conversations. Like, just super cool.
Totally.
All right, number 2 for you, Andrew. Tell me, I know you work with some supplement brands, some protein bar brands. I've told you that I eat a lot of them myself. So excluding brands that you work with, the best protein bar out there is blank.
This is tough because I know we're not on a video podcast, but you can see in my office the boxes of different protein supplements that I have lined up here. I can't give you a specific brand, but I will tell you any brand that has killer peanut butter recipes and flavoring is a home run in my book. Like, yeah. Definitely love anything peanut butter. I will say, and this is not an ad, that we don't entirely work with them. We work with some of their sister companies. I've been chomping on Bear Bells a lot lately. So those are at Trader Joe's. They have a good distribution model there. They have good vegan options through some of their bars. So I've been crushing some Bear Bells. That is the one thing I'll give you a peek behind the curtain. Not a direct client. I have just been crushing Bear Bells protein bars.
You know, an interesting trend that I'm seeing too on TikTok, but also just in general, is the idea of like a protein bar being the base ingredient for something else, whether it's like I'm going to make pancakes or I'm going to make cookies or I'm going to make some even crazier things. So it's cool. It's a cool space that's developing quickly, and there's some good stuff out there. I'm glad you found a few that you like. And like I said, I'm buying a lot of the brands that you work with. So you're in good shape.
I love it.
All right, number 3. This is going to be a tough one here. Tell me your favorite athlete brand campaign or partnership that you or Othello did not work on, and why? What's one out there you're like, that was good stuff?
That's really tough. I see a lot of campaigns day in and day out that I don't hesitate to give good feedback or, even criticism on publicly or even behind the scenes. There have been a lot of good campaigns that I've seen done at scale. And I think that's the true bread and butter from a marketing perspective these days, are the ones that really can activate with as little cost as possible. If you can move the meter with as little money as possible, that's a home run. I don't like brands that invest millions and millions of dollars into these big campaigns and, do these things. I think a good example, as much as, they just did a massive layoff, yesterday, but I would say Coinbase, their Super Bowl ad, like freaking QR code, like blew up. Everyone talked about it. Simple, like simple marketing moves the meter.
Love that. Originality, like do something that people aren't expecting. Like it's not that hard when you just allow yourself to think outside the box, so to speak.
Absolutely.
I'm excited for this one. We talked about it a little bit in our interview, even before we started recording. Again, I cannot express enough my respect and admiration for what you've already built with Othello and what you're continuing to do. So tell me the biggest lesson you've learned so far in starting, running, and ultimately growing this company.
Sounds cliche, but you're going to fail a lot. Like you're going to lose a lot of clients. You're going to get hurt. You're going to piss off your significant other. You're going to lose time being a parent. There's a lot of sacrifices that go into it. And in the end of the day, all you can hope for is that it pays off. Like you really have to not be too emotional and vulnerable to everybody around you to make it seem like you're not able to weather the storm and the strength of everything that you have going on. But you have to know how to set your barriers, set your ground, and really just make sure that what you're doing, it requires endurance. It requires fortitude. It requires just a lot of reps. And even then, you are going to fail. The clients that you think will never, ever leave are probably going to leave you. The brands that spend millions of dollars with you and you're like, this is the best brand, the relationship I have with the CEO is the best, is probably going to be the one that ends early for no reason at all. You have to expect the unexpected, and you just have to be thinking proactively as much as possible. Like, it is the hardest part of what we do, but it's the number one lesson that I give any intern that comes into our internship program, is really understand what it is that we are doing who we're doing it for, and just always remember that we are at the intersection of entertainment and education at the end of the day. And for nothing else, we're here to serve that purpose, is to make sure we hit those two sectors and we help people understand and know our why, our truth, and what we're doing. If we have questions, be vulnerable. If we have answers, don't act like they are the finite 100% answer. In a lot of ways, 2 + 2 isn't always 4. It's not always that way. And again, some people would think you're crazy, but it's not always the case, and you have to be open to those discussions and dialogue. I think the more that you can just embrace the uncertainty, the uncomfortability, the better off you are. I go to bed every single night, as morbid as this sounds, Neil, I go to bed every night thinking that if this is my last night on earth, that I'm good. I'm good. Like, I have my family set up for success. I got everything set and situated. I'm good. It is a really weird, and my wife hates every time I say this. It's a morbid way of thinking, but it's a coping mechanism. When you've kind of seen certain things, both professionally and personally, like I have in my 34 years, I'm not here to lecture and say, oh, I'm a whippersnapper, but like, I've gone through some traumatic stuff. I've been laid off. I've, been cheated on. I've been hurt. I've lost family members. Like, I've probably seen more and done more than a lot of people probably anticipate from a middle-class white guy from Southeast Virginia. But I'm not here to preach that. I'm here to just internalize it, use it as my own truth, and hopefully it comes out to serve a greater purpose through what I'm doing, both in my personal and professional life every single day.
Yeah. No, I can feel like there's something powerful in what you're saying around just conquering fear in all its forms. And like, when you can rise above that, I mean, hell, then nothing can stop you. It's super cool. All right, then we're gonna have some fun here with this one. Number 5. We're gonna put your sports fan hat on and tell me the most memorable sporting event you've ever watched, and if it's different, the most memorable that you've attended in person.
A memorable sport easily. 2018, I believe, Stanley Cup Game 5. Game 5 or Game 6. I don't remember. I should know this, being a diehard Washington Capitals fan, but when the Washington Capitals won the Stanley Cup, I had a $100 bet, 14-1 odds that Capitals were going to win the cup. So rarely do you ever bet on your team and it pays off in a big way, but watching your team win and also getting a huge payday, there's nothing like it. Like, you might as well just hit the Triple Crown. So I'll never forget that night. I was, at a bar with my wife and some friends in Stamford, Connecticut. I wanted to be in Vegas, but I also knew, like, I was lucky enough to go to Game 2 or I think it was Game 2 in DC with my brother. And just, if Washington never makes it to a Stanley Cup again in my lifetime, I'll never forget that experience. Like, best sporting like series and experience of my life. So the way that they celebrated, there's nothing like it. And it's something that you felt it. You felt all the energy and everything come from that city, and it was awesome. So definitely 2018 Stanley Cup champions, Washington Capitals.
That's a great one. It was just as fun watching the celebrations of Ovechkin and the teammates for what seemed like weeks on end. They were drunk for like the rest of the summer, it seems like.
Totally, and God bless him for it.
That's so great. Number 6 for you. Tell me the most viral or memorable in some way, the most viral social post from an Othello athlete.
Well, I can tell you right now, one of our CrossFit athletes just advanced from the semifinals and is going to be going to, I believe, her third or fourth CrossFit Games coming up at the beginning of August. She already has a very dominating social media presence. She's gained, has to be over 30,000 followers in the last 2.5 weeks on just Instagram. And she hasn't really done anything. Like, there's been no secret sauce except for the power of her brand. She is merged. She's coming up on 1 million followers on Instagram, and she crushes. Like, across all of her channels, she just has such a dominating brand that expands beyond the world of CrossFit in so many ways. So obviously everybody knows who Tia and Matt Frazier are, but Danny Spiegel is a name that you shortly won't forget, from just a marketing and brand perspective. And I can promise you that.
Do you kind of put your hat on and are like, okay, she's about to win this event or she's about to compete at the CrossFit Games? like how can we maximize these moments on social, or you cannot really think like that in those isolated moments.
I think the cool thing with CrossFit is that so many people are documenting it, and there's so many professionals documenting it from a content perspective. CrossFit does an incredible job from content, like freelance and contractors and even brands. The content that's pumped out from professional CrossFit events is insane. And if you look at Danny's social media pages, it's just repurposed. There was an Instagram reel that I noticed the other day. It popped up on my feed. It was from a photographer. I wasn't even following this guy. 4.8 million views on that one reel from the Granite Games of Danny. It was just a reel. It was not a crazy narrative high. Like, I mean, it was a very well done, Instagram reel from a respected photographer and content guy, but nothing that you probably would be like, oh, like, holy cow, 4.8 million views. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, that was probably one of like 300 things that got posted of her that had hundreds of thousands, if not millions of views from that one week alone. So, I think she went into Granite Games with like around 860,000. She's at like 902,000 as I sit here in this moment. So it's like, I'm kind of sitting here and I'm like, is she going to get 1 million followers before the CrossFit Games? Like, this is insane. And there's a very real chance she could do it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I look forward to celebrating or seeing you celebrate when she hits that 1 million. You guys together, I'm sure it'll be great. All right, we're going to dip into your memory bank a little bit here. Number 7, coming toward the wire here. The most memorable partnership activation that you worked on in your entire career, or just one that stands out?
The one that I'll always have PTSD about is I spent about a little over a year working on the World Surf League and the Corona J-Bay South Africa event. And it was like back in like 2016 or 2017. I was the project manager from Octagon working on talent with like on-site agency, like, putting together the entire event. And I actually resigned 3 weeks before the event. So I never got to go to Jeffreys Bay, South Africa. And funny story, I resigned actually in Russia during the 2017 Confederations Cup because I was trying to be respectful and give 3 weeks notice and not 2 weeks notice. But I was swiftly met with a lot of hostility from quite a few people leaving at such a very busy time for our agency and brand. But I look back on it and I'm just like, Russia was a crazy experience. I think being to go to the Maldives, I spent about a month in the Maldives with Chris Hemsworth, MIA, Diego Luna, for Corona and Parlay for the Ocean. So I always joke with people. I'm like, Chris Hemsworth and he called me Stallsy. I called him Hemsy. We talked about Rush on a deserted indigenous island in the Maldives. Not many people can say that. He's a great dude. He's a great dude. So you kind of have those cool celebrity experiences on top of it. But Maldives was great just because I'll never, ever in my life take a 49-hour flight and journey to get to an island ever again. That was brutal. You had like 15 bags with you as well.
Oh man, it's a lot of hard work working in the industry, but you get to have some pretty cool memories too. That's fucking awesome. Sure. Number 8, Andrew, time for our food question. Tell me, if I visit you out there in the East Coast, what's the best meal to get, and where are we going? Where do we get it?
I mean, I'm up here in Connecticut, so obviously my go-to de facto answer has to be pizza. Everyone says we're in the pizza capital of the world, right here in New Haven, Connecticut. I love pizza, and I think there is some incredible pizza up here. I'm bullish to say that this is the pizza capital of the world, but I don't know. I do think it's really, really good. I like Greek style pizza up here. Everything's brick oven, like super, super thin. I like deep dish. I like Greek style. So, there's a good mix, but I'd say we're doing a pizza tour for sure. There's a buddy of mine. I'm not super close to him. But this guy, he works at Twitter and he has this, Airbnb experiencing he does in New York City, where he takes people on Saturday mornings to do a pizza tour around New York City. Yeah. And it has made a killing off of doing pizza tour experiences in New York. And it's crazy. Like there's so many good experiences when it comes to the culinary scene. Bottom line, Pizza Friday in this house is a real thing. Romanacci's right up the street here in Trumbull, Connecticut. That's our jam. That's what we do.
Very nice. Well, I won't tell any of my fellow New Havenites, that Pepe's and Sally's is not part of your answer. But there's definitely out there. Number 9. Tell us about Andrew Stallings, the women's hockey coach. Tell like what kind of coach are you? And just what's it like coaching hockey?
Yeah, so I coached for about 7 seasons up here in Connecticut for a local high school in Stamford. It's a great outlet, great experience. I had the privilege to be able to coach with, people that obviously understood the X's and O's of the game probably a little bit better than me. I'm very much like morale, rah, go team, locker room kind of coach. I'm like the guy that's going to burn the girls on the ice just with endurance and laps and exercises and conditioning, more so than doing, very strategic puck handling and in zone, out of zone, neutral zone puck work. So, blessing in a lot of ways. My wife got pregnant. We had our first son about 8 months ago. I took this last season off, getting a lot of, calls and emails from local coaches, seeing if I want to come back as an assistant coach and this and that. Once you kind of step out of it, it's hard to go back in right away. So obviously, I don't know if you've seen, but no one listening can see, but I just had a wrist surgery about a week ago. So I'm not going to be playing hockey for a while. But on top of that, I don't know. We'll see what happens come the fall, but I would be hard pressed to think that I'm even going to have the time to commit to that, especially with the way how crazy business has been to end the year already.
Well, if you're as your kid gets older and starts misbehaving, you can always back escape them if they misbehave.
Totally.
Number 10, we went into this a little bit. I guess just give me your quick take on athletes and NFTs or tokens. Like, should athletes be creating their own tokens?
I'm not the guy to ask for that. I'll be honest. I don't like crypto. I don't like NFTs. I think there's a time and a place for it. I think there's a lot of people that are super, super educated. We do have some cryptocurrency sponsors that we deal with and work with that are very, very versed in it. Like they're actually mining and, doing that kind of stuff. I understand it to the level and degree that I need to, and I can. I pay attention to it, but I don't know. I think it's very difficult for me to give my resounding thumbs up that it's the best thing in the world. I think it's like, representation, right? Like find people that have diversified opinions on it, good expertise, good case studies, and, simplify. I think the problem that I have with Web3, the metaverse, DAOs, all this stuff and NFTs and even crypto is that it's so complicated. Like I love TikTok because it's an 8-second video and it gets right to the point. You give me a crypto bro at a TGI Fridays on a Thursday telling me about freaking Web3s and DAOs and this and that. I don't care how much money it makes. I'm done. I can't deal with any of that stuff. So, it's a little difficult for me to keep up with it. We lean on a lot of different, people within our team to keep us up to speed and educated so that we're not entirely missing the boat. But if you're asking me if I'm staying up late at night, studying this space and, really just so excited, not really. I'm more focused on sports memorabilia and autographed die cast cars of NASCARs that I've built out, for the sponsorship plan.
Is there a bit of like shiny new toy syndrome where you have to like, you can't point and stare and look at every little thing that comes along, where you got to really, focus at times as well. And still keep in touch and see what is going to have staying power. Yeah,
I think so. Look, there's a reality that you can, if your best friend says, hey, give me $1,000, I can turn it into $10,000. Like if you have the disposable income to try and do stuff like that, like go for it. Like, this is not financial advice, but I would say, I love risks. I don't think I'd be where I am today if I didn't take risks, right? Like I look at everything in life as like being a little bit of a degenerate gambler. I've said it several times today. I know a lot of people that just aren't like that. They like their structure, they like their paychecks, they like their 9 to 5s, they like knowing at 5:01 p.m. they can turn their work off and turn it back on at 8:59 a.m. I've never had a job like that in my entire life. I dream of people that can actually turn work off in their mind. And I like if I had a superpower, Neil, that's what it would be. Turn work off for literally off hours and turn it back on. I literally have no idea how to do that. A bit off topic, but I think there's a lot of excitement, but there's, a massive decline right now. And I think in some ways, how can you take and refine this to make it your own and be excited about it? I think, again, find the simplicity. You don't need to dive into this super crazy melodic, strategic, layered project of this stuff. I think the people that simplify NFTs and Web3s and they bring are the ones that are going to be able to bring it to TVs and households and everything like that. You got to simplify. And right now, this stuff is not simplified.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. Like, otherwise, you're going to scare people off if it becomes too complex.
Yep.
All right, and you kicked ass in your pit stops. Now your chance to take over the podcast and tell us your social media all-star to follow. Just tell us who they are, what platform they're on, and why they're worth following.
Man, it's tough because I don't think there's one individual that like professionally I follow. I'll tell you my favorite TikToker right now. It's Kevin Cooney, the guy that does like the good morning, you bad, beautiful bitch. Like I just like do these pump up things. Like me and my coworker Alyssa, almost every single morning, we send those TikToks to each other, and it's just like a running joke of what we do. So I just like parody, satire, comedy to lighten the load a little bit. There's some people that are doing social media right. There's some people that aren't doing it right. I think every single day, I guess maybe I do know how to turn work off because I don't have anything that sticks where I'm just like, this is amazing. I think every day there's new content that grasps, what I see and what's cool. I think one of our clients right now is really doubling down on drone, like FPV drone pilot content. And he's like becoming one of like the next big filmers in drone, piloting. And he's crushing it with a lot of his content. He's a skimboarder by day, usually, like him and his wife, Amber Tortorelba. They're like two of the biggest names in skimboarding, but they're also insanely good content creators. The homie is a great drone pilot. And I have been working so hard to like slowly build a Rolodex of like, dude, could the Colorado Avalanche use him for like pre-game introductions during game 1 of the Stanley Cup Finals? I would love that. Like, that'd be so cool. So like, those are the kind of projects that we're looking at for him. But Patty Mack is who I would also follow. Go follow him if you want some really cool drone content for sure.
I like that. That's a nice recommendation. Definitely gonna check that out. That's awesome. And how about you, Andrew? Where can we find you as well as all things Othello Group on digital social media?
Stallings 88 across virtually every social media platform. Othello Group, ATHELO Group, across all social media platforms. And give us a follow, give us a like, tell us we suck. Just don't ignore us. If for anything, come and yell at us, come tell us we're doing something wrong. That's more fun than liking or following to me. So come join the party. The water's warm, I promise.
There we go. Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast today, Andrew. Just such good stuff, such good insight. You're super articulate and thoughtful with your responses, and definitely keep up with everything that Othello Group is doing, all the athletes they have on their roster, and just thank you so much again, and best of luck in the future.
Thanks, Neil. I really appreciate it, brother. Such a good time catching up with you.
Really appreciate Andrew Stallings, founder and president of Othello Group. Just super thoughtful, really articulate, and you really got to hear, not just his learnings and lessons and insights on, the sports business side, the partnership side, the brand activation side, but also what he's learned through his life, through the ups and the downs, the challenges, and how he's built Othello Group into the successful business it is today and continuing to grow. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for downloading, listening. Thanks again, of course, to the guest, Andrew Stallings. You can find me on LinkedIn, where I post more content. You can hit me up on Twitter as well, Neil Horowitz at NJH287. The website, dsmsports.net. Check it out, where you'll see more content episodes, and subscribe to the podcast on whichever platform is your favorite. Until next time, this is Neil Horowitz signing off for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.